You're listening to Dramas Over Flowers with Saya, Anisa, and Paroma. Hi, I'm Saya.
I'm Anisa.
And I'm Paroma.
And today we're doing something a little different. We thought we would talk about something that had just momentarily come up in one of our group chats, which is that we were talking about the idea of growing out of a fandom. We talk a lot about what got us into a fandom, but I feel like there's also this journey that we go on. And I thought today let's talk about what happens, or why do we grow out of a fandom? What happens to us? What's the experience like? So who wants to take it away first?
I guess the first question is, what fandoms do you think you've grown out of?
I've definitely grown out of Harry Potter.
Yeah, that one didn't age well, did it?
I've grown out of so many. Harry Potter somewhat. Supernatural. And Vampire Diaries. I'm just recently thinking of all of because there is a 2000s a renewal of interest in 2000s content, be it YA books or YA shows.
Oh, really?
And so a lot of them are being on YouTube, they are being recapped by people going my God, did you know this existed? And this is the story. And
are they by people half our age?
Yeah, is this millennial nostalgia content, or is it young people being look at these old shows, aren't they wild? Could you imagine?
No, it's both. It's both Gen Z. Yeah,
there's
it's both Gen Z
going,
what? This existed? And they love it, by the way. They are my God, why does this not exist more?
Well, they're really into 90s music, right? Kids who weren't alive in the 90s, they're really into 90s music and fashion and stuff
kids
now.
Who weren't alive in the 90s.
They weren't.
We've crossed this breach of where we were the young people, and now we're we were young once.
We're not yet.
Yes.
We've crossed over and become our parents. Even though we're not even parents ourselves.
Yeah.
This is the life that we are now
so
having to...
innit? As you live, the way that you become the meme that you imagined other people, the conde type people, and you're I'm one of them now.
I mean, we're not boomers yet, but we're definitely on our way there. But that's so interesting. So are there particular shows that are extremely popular on here, or is it just anything from that time period? Or is it specific types of shows?
I mean, I think, like I said, it's mostly YA content that's seeing a bit of a revival. So a lot of shows that were the original, what the Blair and what was it?
Gossip Girl. Yeah, I was gonna say.
Girl.
Yeah,
oh, Gossip Girl.
But that got a reboot.
That's horrible. So everybody hates that.
But
so
the old one was horrible too, but in a kind of a
comparatively.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that was so much better. I mean, genuinely enjoyed the first season.
Yeah, it was super trashy TV, but trashy in a really compelling way, right?
Right.
This was. I watched the first season. I think, when did I give up Gossip Girl? I just couldn't stand it anymore and I gave it up. But the first season, it really had some real compulsive pull.
Completely. I am just waiting for the current this trend to find Orange County, because I don't know why that hasn't had
you mean the
entire
OC?
thing.
The OC, right? People haven't found it yet.
So are these,
but also One Tree Hill, right?
To these WB shows, what used to be called WB, now it's the CW.
CW.
I mean, honestly, I don't know which channel they all belong to, but it's generally the popular ones of that time, everything from Pretty Little Liar to I know that was more early 2010s, but I'm kind of counting that as our era.
That's not my era.
I mean,
that's my little sister's era. But yeah,
interesting, because I didn't watch Pretty Little Liars, but I did watch a lot of the stuff that was at the same time as that. The Lying Game, for example.
Oh, the Lying Game, yeah. Oh, I read the books first.
Yeah.
Does that age?
Basically, that was our YA era, even though we had already aged slightly out of it.
Yeah, we were well into new adulthood.
I was doing teen stuff in my 20s, basically, and then 20s stuff in my 30s.
So that's a fandom that's coming back.
Yeah.
Is that a fandom that you feel like you've grown out of, though?
I mean, I was like, somebody was doing a recap of Vampire Diaries. Like, this is like a 3-hour long recap or a 4-hour long recap. Like, it's very intense. And they were giving us background of the stuff that was going on for production that I had no idea of, honestly, even though I was in the fandom. And I'm like, I remember half of this stuff, not the other, but obviously I remember the plot lines. And it's just, I'm like, wow, I was like very intensely into this and I no longer am. I really don't care.
This is interesting though, because I feel like a lot of our like looking back on older content in the last 5 to 10 years has been like, oh, this was actually so problematic. It was actually racist. It was actually this. It was actually that. So like, it's kind of refreshing to have people going back and watching old things and be like, this was great. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's the kind of stuff where it's like they're aware. I think the problem with like the thing that we were dealing with in our generation. Wow, I just feel sad saying that. Anyway, the thing that we were dealing with was that we were learning what the problematic stuff was as this content was coming out, and the discussions were new. These discussions hadn't happened before. So our focus on the problematic aspects were a lot more intense because we had to establish that these things are problematic. Don't you see? Whereas like some 10 years on, like most of those conversations, a lot of those conversations have already been had. It's been established. So these kids are coming in. They're like, yeah, we already know this stuff is problematic. Like it doesn't need to be underscored constantly. So we can discuss all of the other stuff. Look at how weird this is and how cringe that is, but also how fun this is. And did you know they did that? And it's like, I don't know, they can just be unfettered and excited.
We had this discussion quite a while ago in one of the group chats. I can't remember which one. I think I remember saying, even though I'm not into Gilmore Girls anymore, I'll watch anything, any video essay about it. I'll listen to any analysis because that's always going to interest me, even if I sort of hate the original text or whatever it is. I think I've actually reached a saturation point with that. Like, I've taken in so much that I've even outgrown the critique part of it. But also I think that people have come through the critique part of it, and now you're seeing stuff like specifically for Gilmore Girls talking about all the things that are great about it. Yeah, and like, I don't agree with that, actually. Like, so yeah, maybe part of reaching saturation is like because I have a very specific position on it now, and like the problems outweigh the good parts of it for me in Gilmore Girls.
For Gilmore Girls, yeah, but for me specifically, I saw the problems a lot earlier than they started getting pointed out. So I already went through my disappointment cycle by the time the critique had already started coming out. So I was over them. The things that I had always disliked or felt awkward about turned out to be stuff that had legitimate critique behind it. I just didn't have the language to express it at the time. So it's like those weren't a shock to me, and they didn't disturb me to the extent that I've seen a lot of fans of Gilmore Girls get disturbed later. I mean, the whole, really classist takes, the white supremacist takes, and definitely showing people of color in a very certain way. All of those things were kind of obvious.
But Gilmore Girls, like further sort of compounding of its sins, also came because when they did what was it called? A Year in the Life.
Oh God, that was horrible.
Was that 2016? Was that 2016?
I can't even remember. Was it that long ago? Wow.
I don't remember.
Something like that.
It was the worst. Like, I had never liked Rory, but I had not disliked her this much ever. Like, why did they make it just so we could hate Rory through and through? I don't know.
Isn't it? It's like you would expect that for a show that was about like personal introspect. Okay, it wasn't, but like you had time to like introspect and retrospect on the problems of the series and then deal with it in that that continuation in the sequel in an interesting way that sort of acknowledges the problems. But the problem, double down. Yeah, exactly. Like you failed to recognize the problems, and so that kind of ruined it even more. I think
it came out in 2016. And I feel like the fact that it came out in 2016 probably made people have an even more of a reaction to the fact that they didn't deal with any of that stuff, because we were in a pretty interesting moment in culture in 2016.
That's true.
You know, with people seeing the collapse of a lot of institutions that they had thought to be, you know, sort of solid and stable and unable to be shaken, which like they were never, but, you know, people had the idea that they were, and they were like in shock already. So... I'm talking about Americans.
No, I got that. And but also, like, you know, I think people had an expectation of this particular showrunner whose name I've forgotten, but like,
Amy Sherman Palladino.
Right, Palladino. And that because our nostalgia made us think that the show was smarter than it actually was. And we expected there to be commentary, like relevant commentary, and there was just a complete absence of.
Yeah.
Plus,
it was in love with
stuff.
its own the whole show, the problem with the show was that it was just in love with itself a bit too much. And I mean, one of the problems with the show, which didn't allow it to be like an evolved examination of human existence.
So like, to zoom out a bit from the Gilmore Girls bashing session, which I'm like totally in support of, to be clear, is it just like when we grow out of a fandom, is it just that like we no longer connect to the, like, do we mature beyond it? Because I feel like that's not always the case, right? There are things that maybe like, so to give an example, I mean, so I think like what we're talking about, like these YA shows, Gilmore Girls, even Veronica Mars, I'm assuming to a certain point is like stuff we watched when we were really young. Or
yeah,
like
but I still love it. That's what I'm saying.
So you haven't grown out of Veronica Mars?
No, not at all.
Okay, so that doesn't apply then. So, but I'm talking about like stuff that we've grown out of. I feel like there's a genre of stuff that we've grown out of that like we really connected to, and that like forms a really crucial part of our like growing up. So like we can never really separate the feelings of being, I don't know, like 14 or, you know, from the experience of watching that show. And then if you come back to it, say in your 30s, you're definitely not gonna, it probably won't hold up.
Like
but then there's other things. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go on.
There's other things that you find as an adult, for example, or you find when you're like already kind of like a fully formed person, which is what happened for me with K-dramas. Like I haven't changed that much since I started watching K-dramas in the last like 15, 16 years. Like, I mean, yes, I have changed that in the sense that like anyone changes over that amount of time, but like you don't change the same way you do from like your early 20s to your mid 30s, the way you do as you do went from like age 11 to like, you know, 19. That's just like a very different, right? Like, but then there are things for me, like, for example, I have kind of grown out of K-pop, but I know there's lots of people who find K-pop, have found it recently, who are like around the same age as me.
You know, a couple of people.
Some of them are on this call. Yeah,
ages.
exactly. So like, and I don't think that that's necessarily a function of maturity. I think it's just like, I don't know what it is. Like, why did I connect with it so much in 2009? And then by like 2015, I was kind of done. And like, even though I'm enjoying watching y'all's joy and excitement, and like, I'm totally like cheering you on from the side, I like don't really feel any desire to get into BTS in the way that y'all are. I mean, I like them, but like, I'm good. You know what I mean? But, like, what is that?
I think it's two things. I think early fandom is like everything you're describing about why you have these intense experiences with fandom early on in life at these transitional times and growing times in life. Well, that's that period where that fandom, that experience, that text like informs the person that you are and that you're becoming. Like you draw a lot of your principles, your ideologies, all of these things are being played out in the sort of the mart of this fandom, like in the arena of that fandom. And it's the second thing is also like fandom meeting different needs, like whether that's the original material, the original thing, like the show or the book or whatever, or the community around it. And so like I can measure every part of my life according to what I've been into at that time. And like internet fandom is actually pretty recent, like considering my lifespan. It's about half of my life has been in the internet era of like community and fandom. But like even that early part of internet fandom wasn't really the community. Like for me, Harry Potter fandom was not online. It was reading the books over and over again and talking to my sisters about it endlessly for years and years and years, like literally until the last book dropped, and then probably like a few months after that. That my Harry Potter fandom consisted of that. That was the space of it, like that, and a couple of other friends who were into it. Like that, I didn't conduct that online. We went online to read stuff, like in the websites I can't remember right now, but
MuggleNet.
yeah,
Fictionality.
MuggleNet. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, you know, essays that people would write about stuff. I probably wrote essays myself. Of course, they were half finished. I clearly remember writing one about genetic inheritance of magic while I was studying like genetics. And it was like, recombination is everything, people. Recombination is everything. And that would have been like when I was like, I don't know, 18, 19, 20, something like that. 19 at least, maybe 20. So like the era after that, that's when my online, like my internet community fandom started, which for me was with The Wheel of Time, the book series. It wasn't even that I loved the book so much. My sister had been hammering on at me like all summer, like I think it must have been like the summer of 2002 or something. And then by the time, and we were in Bangladesh at that time, by the time we came back and I was about to start uni and everything, and I had started reading these books, and you know, we discovered this webcomic and it was really funny. Oh, and there were people there. There's a guest book. Let's sign it. And then it became a forum. Then it became the community. And I was involved in that community for a really long time. Well, not a really long time relatively, but like 4 or 5 years. But like that was where you learned how to have like conduct yourself in a fandom space and use the fandom to mediate your friendships and your relationships and your politics, because of course this was like during, you know, it was post 9/11, it was during the Iraq War. I still distinctly remember how I identified all of the, you know, people who wanted me to not be alive. Like there's all of this stuff, and it's like it's such an interesting era. But then you like after like I had a bad breakup with that fandom, and then I sort of fell gently into the YA literature, mature women on Facebook kind of space, and then it was a little while, and then eventually, like, you know, you're herded and driven into the K-drama fandom space, which was, you know, it's just
Herded and driven. Wow. Sounds like you had a great
very
experience.
gently, like like, you know, all of the events in your life line up to sort of lead you down to, you know, like, you know, water flowing down a mountain, it all flows into the river, right? The river is K-drama fandom.
It
Like,
sure is.
to this day, even if I don't feel as connected to K-dramas as I was, like, you know, 6 or 7 years ago, in the sense that I don't, I'm not being fed the same way that I was a few years ago, because, like, I live the BTS life now. But that's still a fandom that feels like home. And it's still like it's a space that continues to nourish and nurture if you found your people in it, right? So I know we're talking about outgrowing it, but I think there's some spaces you don't outgrow because the space is such an inclusive space. And it's not even necessarily that it's an externally created one. It's the environment that we've created for ourselves in this fandom.
Yes.
That means that even if you are not as connected to the content, you still have a good experience of the community. This is not the topic that we were meant to actually talk about, but I just
So yeah,
wanted to
but
say.
like no, I mean that was all wonderful, but my question about why, yeah, I guess I have to answer that question myself of like, why did I grow out of the K-pop fandom, but why is it hitting for you
my
too?
answer was like, because it wasn't like it's not perhaps feeding your needs right now. Like your needs are different. What you needed at that time was being fed then, and when that had been fulfilled, you didn't like need it the same way. So, you know, you detach from it like a spaceship.
This is
Like
true
a little,
of,
That's
you know.
very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think you're right about that.
For me, that theory rings true for the romance novel fandom. Like I used to read a lot of contemporary historical romance that I went into, like urban fantasy a lot, and it was surprisingly exactly the same fandom basically, because urban fantasy, especially written by
Unsurprisingly.
women. I mean, no, because urban fantasy for men is a very distinct genre, right?
Oh, right,
And where women are often like refrigerated quick and like just its romances are just a joke.
Refrigerated.
Yeah.
Fridged.
I mean, I will always see refrigerated. So
You make it sound so gentle, but it's like, no, they've actually been like,
so the urban fantasies written by women was just another subgenre of the larger romance genre, and that's not necessarily doesn't always mean that the urban fantasies were like the urban fantasy part of it was a subplot. Often that was the main plot and the romance was the subplot, but it was the same writing space. Like it was all under romance writers of America, and just like they were pretty much everybody was a member of that organization. All of the blogs, the review blogs that I would follow at the time, some of which still sometimes pops up on my feed. Like if I go to Feedly and the blog posts are still there, like 100 posts unread. And it's just like I used to haunt those blogs, the comment section under each book that came out.
Yeah.
The podcasts at the time that would be released, where the audio would only be available on the website, so you had to go and download the
manually download them.
Yeah,
I love that we have those though, because now it means you've got them forever.
Yeah, I have so many of those episodes. They're actually really big files. I should like compress them down at some point. But I used to enjoy being part of that fandom so much. That fandom pretty much solidified my idea of feminism as it exists today. Years ago, I was trying to explain to a friend of mine, just casually, a friend who didn't read romance novels and kind of looked down on it, that if I understood feminism, it was because of romance novels. But I couldn't really explain what I meant, because obviously romance novels are full of really non-feministic tropes. What I actually meant was it was the fandom that taught me feminism. It's the review blogs, it's the comments under it, the critique of each of these novels that came out, like people being very happy about the good tropes and then very openly critical about the bad tropes. Like the readers were never scared of like voicing their real opinion about what was problematic. Of course, there have always in fandoms existed people who are like, but it's for fun, take your critique elsewhere.
Yeah.
That has always
Just turn your brain off
so
and read
annoying.
it. Yes. Well, I mean,
Or
the thing is,
if
like,
you have a critique, just stop reading, which is
Right.
which is something that I hate so much. And I've said this before. I find such absurd parallels with that kind of thinking with in politics, where people say, hey, if you have a critique of the nation, go live in another country. It sounds exactly the same to me. Like if you have a critique, just opt out. No, you can't opt out. It's my thing. You opt out. My God, it's just so annoying.
But also like the idea that like if you are critiquing it, that sort of means you must hate it. But like that's not how
if you hated
works.
it, that's when you would leave. Like the fact that you're sticking around and saying, hey, like, I really love this thing, but I wish that we didn't do this, means that you like love it and you want to improve it.
Right.
And honestly, if you've been in the fandom for 10 years or more, you start seeing the result of those critiques, because the readers who would be part of that fandom and they would participate in those critiques would go on to become writers who would write better stuff. If today we have better stuff, it's because there were readers like 10 years back who were part of the fandom participating in this critique. Like there is a very clear line. It's not even like something fuzzy. That's the same thing you see in K-dramas today. It's K-dramas like viewers who grew up watching toxic tropes, who became K-drama writers and decided to start changing stuff. It's you can't stop critiquing, guys, no matter what people
They look
say.
at it and they're like, I could do that better.
Yeah, I'm so
And
much
they
better.
don't.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I'll like, okay, there are definitely people who consume media that way, and that's fine for them. Like they just, go to a movie, watch it. They're like, yeah, that was fun. And then they move on with their lives. You know, like that's not us. We want to dissect. We want to analyze. We want to like, you know, that's why we make this podcast, right? Like
right.
we
and
are
other
not...
people don't get to say how you enjoy the thing. Like, I will enjoy it how I enjoy it.
It's fine for people who don't want to engage deeply, but then if you're in a space that's designed for engaging deeply with the text of whatever you're a fan of, like, it's really disingenuous to be like, if you don't like it, just go away, you know?
I feel such a childish urge to like throw things at them, but when I see a comment like that. But to finish my point about like kind of leaving the romance fandom, it's not that I did. I still read romance like maybe once or twice a year. I'll pick up something that you know is really doing the rounds on Goodreads, or one of my favorite booktubers is really talking about. But it's two things happened. One is that I was just generally reading less. I was reading more nonfiction than fiction. And my fiction side of things was being fed by K-dramas a lot. We have talked about this before. Like when we started watching a lot of K-dramas, we kind of
it felt like reading a book.
Yeah, exactly. And so we weren't reading fiction as much. At least I definitely wasn't. My volume of K-drama consumption was
100%.
directly. Yeah.
Even like I've been on an anime kick and I haven't been watching K-dramas because I can't take more than one. I don't know what it is. My brain is like, okay, now we're reading. Now we're watching K-dramas. Now we're watching anime, and like it doesn't really cross over for some reason.
Yeah.
But also the other thing that happened, and again, I am happy to be corrected if I'm wrong. What happened was that the genre that I enjoyed the most, genres that I enjoyed the most were romance historicals and urban fantasy, right? And with both of them, it felt like the protagonists not the protagonists, it was fine. There were more mature protagonists, like all sorts of stories were being told. But like the writing seemed to stop developing or even get younger. Like the kind of writing got younger.
Right.
And I didn't understand why, because like ideally it should be progressing, getting even better. Instead, it felt like it became even more mass market.
Yeah. Like the stagnation drives you out from the fandom. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't really read a lot of urban fantasy, but I also used to read a lot of historical romances, and I feel the same way.
Yeah, right? I
feel that way about fantasy, adult fantasy.
I think all of these,
they haven't changed. Like the world has changed, but you haven't. And I've changed in the world that's changed, but this thing hasn't. And like, you know, adult fantasy, which is dominated by like white men, of course it hasn't changed. Like, you know, no offense. Wait.
I mean, yes,
I do mean some of. I don't want to alienate, if we have like listeners who are white men, I don't want to alienate them.
No, but it's okay. The white men who listen to us, we have found out over time that they are okay with this. Like they understand.
We don't have the kind of white men listeners who are like hashtag not all men, not all white men. They understand that we're making a general systemic critique. Okay. We have faith in you guys.
Yeah, we do. The one part of this space where we did see some really good writing come up is when people of color started writing more. And so you had like different perspectives coming in. And so we would get some really lovely writing. And like, honestly, there are way more there's a lot more diversity in the writing community right now. Just in the last like 4-5 years, that shot up a lot. And thank God, and it's getting even better. And that is very true. And so occasionally from, diverse writers, you would have these really lovely books come out. But I don't know why it's not enough. Like not enough of
because
those
they're
would
still
be...
the exception rather than the rule.
Yes, probably. But also like that general stagnation of writing throughout the writing community also affects, obviously, writers of color, like all human writers, basically.
Yeah.
My point is that it's just like we are getting fewer of those like startlingly good writing. And so this is why I am not surprised that readers today are like, hey, listen, do you know what was happening in 2000s and early 2010s? And here's
I was alive.
Yeah,
I wonder. I feel like this is also like a general trend across different kinds of media because they're becoming, like we all know that the publishing industry is basically in economic shambles. So, when people have less resources and and there's more competition, then they're like, okay, go for the safest, most generic mass market thing possible. And then then like the writers who are doing more interesting and quote unquote risky things with their writing are not even going to get published, and they're just going to be like like editing out all of the interesting parts of people's writing and making it like really bland. And I mean, we've seen a lot of that happen with movies as well, because they're like, oh, make the biggest and most broadly appealing stuff and spend $200 million on it. And the interesting, or like it'll be like really small interesting movies that like don't cost anything, but they're not really willing to invest a good chunk of money on something that's mid-budget and is like interesting and different, or like appeals to like a niche audience, because they're like, well, that's not going to make money.
I mean, this also has got to be why there is the revival of all this old IP, like, the old 2000s shows, because there's nothing good right now. And, with the writers' strikes and the effect of that and the unwillingness of, studios and companies to, like, actually understand what the problem is and, like, pay writers and all of these things, like, the sort of black hole of good content right now means that there's nothing left to do but go to the vault and pick out all the old stuff and be like, oh, well, this was good, wasn't it? Because there's nothing interesting being created right now. All you've got is like, these franchises that are just tired, and like you're not putting in the resources.
Which is
to
not
get
to
a
say
good
that people
story.
aren't trying to create good art. It's just that they're not getting the funding that they need.
Right, exactly. Like there's no support for real art to be sort of to take the risk to exist in the world.
Completely. I agree that I've been reading and hearing so much about how the publishing industry is basically just like push everything through book talk. So if there is a trope trending on Book Talk, they basically are like, which of our authors are writing on that trope? Just like get it fast and get it out. Like prolific writers are getting pushed to write a lot. And the thing is, the editing process has been cut down. The staffs have been basically
decimated.
Decimated.
Yeah.
It's not the best time right now for writers anyway, but it always like shocks me when I go to like old forums, not old forums, like my old haunt. They are still like active forums with like huge communities, and people are like, give me a recommendation similar to this book, and like of 100 comments, like I recognize like the recommendations by 99 of them because they were from my era. And I'm like, how is this possible? Why are they not recommending like newer stuff? And that's sad, but that is what it is. Okay, coming back to K-dramas a bit, we have times when we go through slumps with K-dramas, and like we've all had that certain years where I feel like I'm barely watching anything, and if I'm watching, it's more out of like I should keep up with stuff and not because I really want to. And like over the last year or two, I've kind of come to be okay with that. Like I keep up with the stuff that I like, and then just go watch C-dramas or J-dramas. I think that's what's calling me, or rewatch stuff.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go
Saya.
on. Oh, no, you go on.
I was just like, as we're having this conversation, I'm thinking about this as how like finding a new fandom is kind of like falling in love. And I feel like for me, it's like interesting to see like which fandoms are like a fling and which ones end up being like a long-term relationship that lasts. And like what you're talking about, Paroma, with this K-drama is like,
right?
Right. Like I feel like at this point we're kind of married to K-dramas. And you have ups and downs, right? But like I don't really see myself ever being at a point in my life where I'm not going to be interested in watching them, or I'm not, like I'm coming. We've been doing this podcast for, is it going to be 8 years this year?
Yeah.
Holy
Isn't it
crap.
7 this year?
7?
No, 8. We're completing 8.
Is it? I feel like we're always generous,
started
giving
in
ourselves an extra year.
2017.
Yeah.
So this year will be 7.
Oh,
Yeah.
we're starting
Yeah.
8? Wow.
I think
Yeah.
so.
I seem to always add a year.
Yeah,
onto
you
it.
do.
But still,
I think
that's
we
a
all
long
want to do
time,
that.
right? Like,
Yeah, it
and
is
I
a
mean,
long
we didn't
time.
even start this podcast when we started with K-dramas. Like for me, this year, I was having this like brain explosion moment in our group chat a few weeks ago. Like this year is going to be, like this January or February was like 16 years for me. And so like
16.
I've never
Wow.
loved, and I'm not a fandom type of person. Like that's not my personality to be a fan
You're
of
not?
things. I'm not.
There's the person who like stays up watching LOTR, like doing
I mean,
watches.
I guess like I didn't think I was, because when I was growing up, like everyone was into Backstreet Boys, and I was like, ugh, I don't like. Why would you love someone that much? Like, I don't
Saya
get it.
leaves the chat.
I'm not. I mean, this was 12-year-old me. Okay, so, like
12-year-old me was in love with the Backstreet
that's what I'm saying.
Boys.
12-year-old me was really contemptuous, but like I am not now. I'm just saying, like that's kind of. I wasn't the type of person that felt like I could
Right.
get attached to things in that way. And I didn't actually get attached to anything until I got to a point in my life where I was like really struggling and I needed something to get me through. And that's when I got into like I already enjoyed Harry Potter, but that's when I got into like really deep into like the online fandom and the forums and the fan fiction and the, you know, making friends and having like live journal like hangouts.
You had your whole
like
society. Like
Yes,
it was a
I did.
society.
I did
Yeah.
because I was
With all
like,
of its
my
internal
world
politics.
became very small, and so that was my world. Like being in the online fandom was like my world for a long time, and then like after Harry Potter, it was K-dramas. But to go back to the metaphor of like the relationship, it's like some things you really like and they're very sparkly and shiny and you enjoy them for a short time, and then you're like, you know, doesn't really provide me anything for like the long term. Like there's not really any substance here.
Yeah,
and then
that
there
was
are
your
other
rental
things-
property. Like you lived there, paid
Right,
rent.
exactly. It's not your home. Yeah,
Yeah,
another
exactly.
metaphor is like, is it a short-term lease? Is it an Airbnb?
Is
Or
it
sorry,
student
a
halls?
Verbo. Let's boycott Airbnb. But like, is it, you know, are you there for 3 days? Are you there for a month? Like 2 years?
Yeah.
You're going to buy the house and move in permanently. Like, so I feel like K-dramas for me is the long-term commitment,
Yeah.
right? Where you just,
Yeah.
you always come back to it.
Yeah.
Like,
because
I think
it has-
Taiwanese dramas for me was like a fling.
That's so funny.
But yeah, I mean K-dramas.
But you know how I feel about
getting,
Japanese dramas are like my first
Yeah.
love.
yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I don't necessarily watch them that often now, but when I do go back and watch one, I'm just like, oh,
Yeah, I see why I felt for you.
I'm touching my
That-
heart.
that
Like I'm
was
putting my
anime
hand on my
for
heart.
me.
You can't
Yeah.
see me, but yeah.
Yeah, first love was definitely. I mean, books are always my first love.
I mean, I'm out of
Yeah.
like television
Screen stuff.
media.
Yeah,
J
anime.
dramas are my first love, but yeah, books will always be the first love. I am the Anne of Green Gables in this group. So that was me, that kid, that weird kid who was always saying things that no one understood. Always had my nose in a book. Was always like daydreaming. Had to call my name 10 times before I would even hear you. Like that was me. I was that weirdo. So
Did you spout poetry whenever you saw something lovely?
I spouted it onto my notebooks. I didn't spout it verbally, but I learned pretty early on that would not be accepted. So, but like, no one wanted to hear my weird, yeah.
You know, sometimes, like, speaking of Green Gables and formative texts, like, you know, that was a deeply formative text for me in my life and the shaping of, like, who I am as a person. But as much as I love Anne, when she started speaking in poetry, it's like, Anne, people don't speak like that. Stop, okay? Just use normal, plain speak and, like,
She's
enough
a
with the
fictional
poetry.
7-year-old. What do you
No,
want from her?
11!
I was just in awe of her confidence. Like the thing that always hurt me the most as a kid was my just severe lack of confidence as a child. And I was like, Anne has just the most confidence, the best confidence. I want to be her.
But this is what I mean about it being a
unapologetically
formative
lived
text.
in the world. Yeah,
Right.
she just was herself, and with
As
an
in-
E. You better not
right.
leave off the E. You know, like she didn't care if it was like a 70-year-old man telling her. She just did what she wanted.
Oh, but Anne, so good.
Yeah,
and
Anne
like
was very
Megan follows as Anne was also perfect. I do want to say one more thing before we finish because I feel like this could be construed in a slightly dangerous way by listeners. Like, this is not us saying we're done with K-drama. Like, we haven't fallen out of love with the fandom and now we're like, this isn't like goodbye podcast.
No, absolutely not.
We were meeting today to do something else and we didn't have a chance to do that. So we were like, let's just like shoot the breeze a little bit because we haven't checked in with you guys for a really long time. And we wanted to just have a casual chat rather than structure it heavily the way we usually do. So it's not like, this isn't like an announcement or a warning or anything.
No. Yeah. We're talking about other fandoms that we've fallen in love with, not K-drama fandom.
Yeah.
Maybe we should put that up top. Put it in the description. This is not a goodbye podcast.
Yeah. This is not the end. Yeah. This is just us shooting the breeze. And if you enjoyed that and want us to talk about other stuff, like, do send in, you know, your thoughts, and we always welcome emails for suggestions of what to talk about.
Yeah, that's a very smooth segue. Where can they email us, Saya?
Well, they can email us at dramasoverflowers@gmail.com. They can also find us on Twitter at dramasoverflow. They can find me at notnowsaya.
And you can find me on Twitter, at Anisa Khalifa _.
And you can find me, Paroma, at The Drama Notes. You can find us on Instagram at dramasoverflowers _ You can email us at dramasoverflower@gmail.com. And we have a newsletter. The link for that is in the description.
Also, Paroma has started doing these really fun live streams on her channel, so you should go watch them.
But she's forbidden us to watch them when they're live. So I'll get these notifications saying, "Oh, the Drama Notes is live," and I'm like, "Paroma told me not to go, so I can't go."
Right.
She specifically said, "You guys don't come." It's like, okay then.
Yeah, we have to come watch afterwards and be left out of
I
the
thought
action.
it would be supportive for you if I turned up, but no. No, I'm joking.
I
completely understand.
I would just crumple in self-consciousness if you guys
Do you know,
don't
I just started watching Ginny's Kitchen season 2, and like just that chair shook energy, you know, he's like, he just gets flustered really easily, and he needs to just be left alone to like do what he's doing.
Recover?
Otherwise, otherwise he's just like the poor boy. So
I love
yeah,
him so
I feel
much.
that energy.
I just love him so much in Variety. He's like
He's very like hapless and hopeless sometimes. Like, you have to remind yourself that this guy is like, he's completely like able to take care of himself.
Well,
you
the
don't
thing
need to
is,
feel sorry for him.
He has that effect in a variety show, but then on the other
bachara.
you have this like meta knowledge of how like hugely talented and successful he is in the back of your mind, and you're like, oh, he can't like function. He also has got like that eternally cute face that he's gonna have until he's like a 90-year-old man. So
He's so funny.
Yeah.
I have to say the highlight of season 2 is Gominshi, the new intern. She's so great. I love her.
Yeah, I know her. Like, I've seen her face.
You do.
I'm
You've
pretty
seen
sure
her in Sweet Home. You've seen. Did you see
Ah.
Jiri-san? No, you didn't. I
Just the
watched
first
that.
episode. Was she in that?
But yes. But Parma's definitely seen her in Sweet Home.
No. I've seen her in something else. Youth of May. That's where I've seen her.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I knew her face. Okay, guys.
okay, bye.
Bye.